Good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to this webinar, and in today's session, we'll examine the assessment and moderation of the Synoptic project in the subject area of business and enterprise. Firstly, though, a few introductions to put a face to a voice. My name is Kelly Johnson, and I'm a Provider Development Officer here at NCFE. My background is vocational education, and I have 15 years of experience of working in the FE sector in various roles, including a teacher, a curriculum leader, and a curriculum operations manager. I specialise mainly in the subject of sport, health and fitness, and I've educated young people from level 1 to foundation degree level, including A levels. My role here at NCFE is to support centres through the planning, onboarding and further CPD opportunities for the NCFE qualifications, but in particular the VCERT qualifications, with a focus on promoting and advancing learning. I'm also really pleased that we're also joined today by Cheryl Cameron, who is an external quality assurer for business, IT and sales. Cheryl has worked in the FE sector for 17 years at both independent training providers, FE colleges and a university. Cheryl has worked as a teacher, lecturer, assessor, IQA, teaching, learning and an assessment coach, programme manager and as a head of department. Cheryl has worked for NCFE since March 2020 as an EQA, and Cheryl has delivered a range of qualifications including A levels, NVQs, apprenticeship standards, awards, certificates and diplomas from level 1 to level 7 across the business, IT and sales sector. Would you like to say hello, Cheryl?
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so the plan for the webinar today then is to firstly provide you with a brief summary of our approach to awarding for this session. There will then be an overview of the structure and delivery of the Synoptic project task for business and enterprise in this session. We will then provide information on marking, grading and giving feedback to your learners. We will also detail the IQA process and the documentation that you can use, including the grading calculator, as well as resubmissions and submitting your grades to the portal. Lastly, it will provide information on the EQA support that is available to you and your centre, including the documentation and the process for EQA reviews and expectations, as well as the certification process. And finally, as I've said at the beginning, there is an opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar, so please do feel free to do so using your question box, which is on your GoToWebinar panel. Before I do go through a summary of preparing for the Synoptic project, I'd first like to do a quick poll on how confident you currently feel with the assessment and moderation of the Synoptic project for business and enterprise this year, with 1 being not a little confidence and 10 being very confident. So I'm just going to launch the first poll and it will appear on your screen shortly. So if you could just take a moment or so just to have a think about where you currently feel in relation to your confidence levels, 1 being not a little confidence and 10 being very confident. Okay, so it appears we do have all the results that we're going to get for that first poll. So on your screen now, you will see the results from the responses. So thanks everyone that did place a response into that first poll. And as I said, it was my expectation that for the first question, you would be all at different stages in relation to your confidence levels, with some even as low as 1 to 2. So we do hope that by the end of this webinar, you are feeling more knowledgeable and certainly more confident about the assessment and moderation of the Synoptic project for business and enterprise. And that's not only in this particular year where the adaptations are in place, but also when it's business as usual. So on this slide then, I would first like to briefly explain our approach to awarding for this session. We have updated our assessment variation process to allow centres to use additional test centre locations. We've also adapted our assessment so that they can be delivered in line with public health guidelines. All relevant qualification content must still be delivered and assessment criteria met. To further support centres, significant adaptations have been made to the conditions of the VCERT Technical Award Synoptic project. So what have we done? We have adapted the delivery and completion conditions so that it can now be completed by students remotely where required. We have removed the requirement to complete it within the set number of hours. We have removed the requirement of completion under controlled conditions. And we also brought forward the release of the Synoptic project brief so centres could plan their own delivery timescales around their own delivery plan. And this year it was released back in November, on the 1st of November 2021. And learners do need to be registered and booked onto the controlled assessment so it can be viewed and accessed. We've also removed the timescales around the submission deadlines, but there is a deadline for having the final grades onto the portal, and that date is the 27th of May 2022. Learners will still be able to have a resubmission opportunity, but this will be managed internally by the centre. Learners should have the opportunity to undertake two submissions, so a first submission and a resubmission, but it is the final grade that should only be entered onto the portal. Grades for a learner's first submission do not need to be entered onto the portal this year, but assessment records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail of the resubmission if the learner has used that opportunity. The EQA review deadline is before the 31st of July 2022, and that is to allow for results to be confirmed by the end of July for performance tables. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Cheryl, who is going to talk to you about the structure and delivery of this year's Synoptic project.
For business and enterprise. One of the first starting points I would recommend is that you download the necessary paperwork from the NCFA QualHub website. I would recommend that you have copies of the documents that are available. In particular, the assessor feedback to learner form, the declaration of authority, which should be signed by yourself and the learner, and then the learner log. This is an essential document. Learners must complete this every time that they work on the project to track their progress. This will support the learner to achieve assessment objective 5, which is to manage and evaluate the project. The 21-22 brief is focused upon the made-to-measure handmade shoe business S5S Limited. The business is based in London and is well known to sports and media celebrities from across the world. S5S Limited does not yet have an online presence. Due to the disruption to trading from March 2020, the business has decided to start trading online, and they want to present an image of a modern 21st century business. Learners are asked to produce a business plan that S5S Limited could present to the bank when applying for a bank loan. It's important that learners read the brief and identify the key points as detailed in the qualification specification, such as areas of research. Learners may wish to start to research the customer base, competitors, current and potential demand for handmade shoes, legal requirements around the setting up of an online business, physical resources, technological resources, internal and external growth opportunities that are available to the business. Learners should be encouraged to complete this research, thinking about location, competition, costings of resources that are detailed in the brief. For example, learners might like to do some research on how much a warehouse would cost in Barking, East Ham or Dagenham. Research may support the achievement of higher grades, as the research can be used to support any analysis or evaluation that the students carry out, and this is linked to bands 2 and 3 of Assessment Objective 3. Human resource requirements to think about to support their expansion into online sales. So learners may wish to consider plans that are in place to recruit shoemakers, mould makers, packaging and distribution staff, websites and social media manager. There's also the change to Safia's role is detailed in the brief. To prepare, learners could be asked to research job descriptions and salaries for the roles. In terms of finance and funding, learners need to focus on how S5S Limited will fund the new online business. There's lots of financial information in the brief, such as shoe sales, income statements, wages and productivity levels for shoemakers and the shoe mould maker. And there's also forecast data for the first 12 months of online trading. Learners should spend time identifying the costs as detailed in the brief and Appendix 1 to ensure they produce accurate financial data to support the achievement of Assessment Objective 4. In terms of business planning, learners need to understand the purpose of business planning. In this case, so that S5S Limited can gain funding from the bank to fund their new online department. Learners might also want to think about the problems that S5S Limited could face. What support and information may be required to support this bid for funding? And as mentioned previously, the assessment this year is managed internally by yourselves, as detailed in the qualification adaptation for the session. So now that learners have started to consider the research and they've started to think about the business, now they can look at the task itself. Learners are required to produce a business plan for S5S Limited. The Synoptic project brief details the mandatory sections which must be included in the project. I will provide an overview of the expected content of each section. So section 1 is the company description. This should include detail about the business. So for example, the name of the business, a summary of the current business and the planned expansion into online sales. Learners could identify the aims and objectives of the business and the legal structure. Section 2 will focus on market analysis. And in this section, learners could include information about the market in which the company operates, also thinking about what the new target market might be. They can detail the industry profile, identifying competitors and the current competitive environment and any potential suppliers. Learners should be encouraged to research the made-to-measure handmade shoe industry to identify potential competitors, thinking about the size of the market, is it growing or shrinking, and also to start to identify who buys custom-made shoes. Is there a presence already online for handmade shoes? Section 3 is the marketing section. Learners should include details of the product and services that S5S Limited offer, making reference to the place, price and promotion. Learners could think about the current offer and how this will be adapted for the online market, taking into account examples such as price. Will that change for the online market? Marketing methods. What marketing methods will be used to tell existing and potential customers that S5S Limited now have branched out into online sales? The company currently rely on word of mouth marketing. Will this still be appropriate for the new department? Learners could consider a range of methods and select the most appropriate, justifying their decision. In section 4, learners should consider the people and operational considerations to complete the people and operations section. Learners may wish to look at recruitment, focusing on recruitment of staff for the new department. Some of those roles are highly skilled. The shoemaker, the mould maker, are they easy to recruit to? Is the people with those skills in the area? They might also want to think about how they're going to recruit for warehouse staff and the website and social media manager. Section 5 is all about the financial plan. This should include details of startup costs, running costs, break-even, gross and net profit. The brief contains financial information that learners will need to create the financial plan. So there's detail in the brief around salaries, sales forecasts, predicted costs of 1.25 million to equip the new workshop, updates to the website that are required, how the company plan to create a worldwide promotional campaign and purchase the app that are detailed in the brief. The appendix tables 1 to 4 detail shoe sales to date, income statements, salaried and productivity of a shoemaker and shoe mould maker, and forecast data for the first 12 months of trading. Remember, the new department will open in July 2022. Learners may wish to comment on the impact of the change in business circumstances which forced the shop to close between March 2020 and May 2021. Learners are required to produce a business plan that S5S Limited could present to the bank when applying for a bank loan. Remind learners of the intended audience from previous sessions. It's in some learner projects where learners have written the business plan and at the end said it's not a viable business. In this case, it's to remind learners that S5S Limited are going to use the business plan to obtain funding, and therefore a plan must be supportive of this. Learners can mention the viability of the business to achieve Assessment Objective 5, and to achieve that, learners must evaluate the project, thinking about how well they have managed the project. Learners could include that evaluation in the answer in the Synoptic project within a designated evaluation section. The completion of the learner log will also contribute towards evidence of how the learner has managed and evaluated their project. Over the next few slides, I'm going to talk through marking and grading of the Synoptic project. When it comes to assessing the Synoptic project, this should be done holistically. The Synoptic project accounts for 60% of the final grade. You, as the assessor, will be judging the project as a whole, and it will be assessed against each of the assessment objectives. So for business and enterprise, we have 5 assessment objectives for the project. The 5 assessment objectives are detailed on the slide. Each assessment objective has a different weighting. The band awarded for each assessment objective will inform the overall grade awarded for the Synoptic project. This will be the grade that you enter into the portal. We will show you how to calculate the final grade later on in the presentation. Marking and assessment of the Synoptic project can only take place when the learner has completed the project and submitted that complete project. Remember, for this session, learners can make 2 submissions. The first submission must be received, marked, assessed and sampled by the internal quality assurer before this is returned to the learner. The learner will then have the opportunity to resubmit their second and final submission. The opportunity to resubmit should be offered to learners who have not yet achieved an assessment objective or learners who wish to improve their grade. Resubmissions will need to be assessed, graded and internally quality assured again. We recommend that the first submission should be received by the end of March to provide sufficient time for marking, IQA and resubmissions if required. As mentioned previously, Assessment Objective 5, remember that this is linked to the completion of the learner log and/or the learner's evaluation of the project. Okay. Descriptors have been written for each assessment objective, and assessors will use the grading descriptors to determine the banding decision for each assessment objective. The students will also be able to see these grading descriptors as they are included in the Synoptic project brief. There are 4 bands that can be awarded. There's not yet achieved, band 1, band 2 and band 3. Each band contains subject-specific grade descriptors. You must review the project and determine the band which is most fitting to the level and standard of work produced by that individual learner. Keywords are highlighted in bold to support you to make the assessment decision. The example presented on the slide details the grading bands for Assessment Objective 1, which is to recall knowledge and show understanding. So when making your assessment decision, consider how well the learner has achieved the band from the evidence presented. Have they correctly used business and enterprise terminology? Is it accurately applied throughout the project? Have they appropriately applied this knowledge to the project? So for example, you might want to ask yourself, has the learner identified that the company is a limited company and recalled the features and characteristics of a limited company? Has the learner recalled knowledge that you've previously taught them from Unit 1 and Unit 2 and applied this to the project brief? Prior to assessing, And even before you begin the Synoptic project, if you haven't yet started this, you may find it useful to look at the sample portfolios which contain learner work that we have available on QualHub. On the qualifications page, under the Assessment Materials tab, you'll find some example work which is graded at the different levels. This can give you a good idea of what the different grades would look like. In these documents, you'll find the evidence produced by a learner, the feedback an assessor has given them, and comments from an external quality assurer who's justified why the grade has been achieved. When making your assessment decision, you must ensure that this is clearly identified and the band awarded is recorded for each assessment objective. It must be clear what assessment objectives have not yet been achieved. Formal feedback is provided to the learner after Iqa process in line with the adaptations for this session. From the EQA reviews that took place last year, I have listed examples of best practice that the EQA team have identified, which you may find useful when marking and assessing the completed Synoptic projects this session. There should be a consistent approach taken to the grading of each assessment objective. It's really useful to standardise grading between assessors and the IQA and conducting standardisation towards the start of the project internally across the team. You should always grade each learner as an individual, taking a holistic view of the whole completed project. Show where you've assessed the learner work using ticks to confirm agreement with the learner response. Annotate the project, identify areas of strength, offer formative feedback to confirm if an assessment objective has been covered, detail where each assessment objective is covered or partially covered. This provides a clear audit trail of assessment, which indicates to both the internal and external quality assurer where evidence is located for each assessment objective. Remember to authenticate the project to confirm this is the learner's own work. You may wish to use probing questions and phrases to encourage the learner to self-reflect and evaluate their own work. A number of centres last year used different coloured highlighters to identify on learner work where evidence met a specific assessment objective. This provided a clear visual image of where the evidence was located for the audit trail. Now let's explore a level 1 merit response to identify how the marks were awarded. So we're looking at assessment objective 1 here, and the learner has been graded as a band 1. The learner has recalled basic knowledge across their response. The response lacks detail to support the achievement of a higher band. Assessment objective 2, again, this has been graded as band 1. The knowledge applied is limited. So as we graded before for assessment objective 1, the knowledge that the learner has recalled has been applied in a limited way. It's not always accurate or relevant. It's graded as band 1. When we look at assessment objective 3, this was also graded as a band 1. The learner has responded simply to the data in the project brief. So they've taken the information from the project brief and put that into their financial plan and haven't done any analysis with the data. The second year net profit should be recorded as a negative as sales do not exceed costs. So there are some calculation errors in the learner response. Assessment objective 4 again has been graded as a band 1. The response is partially complete because of the error. This error would suggest that the learner is not clear on how to calculate positive and negative profit. This would impact upon the analysis of the viability of the business. So the learner has demonstrated basic technical skills. And the final part of that project is looking at assessment objective 5. And again, this has been graded as a band 1. The learner has planned and prepared to complete the project, and that's evident from that evaluation. The learner has used a limited range of project stages, timeframes and resources, and they haven't detailed them in the evaluation. They've made comment on some of their approaches, but it's very brief. So overall, we've looked at the 5 assessment objectives very quickly, and the learner has achieved band 1 for each of those assessment objectives. Therefore, overall, the learner has achieved a level 1 merit. The project is brief. It lacks detail outside of the information provided in the Synoptic project brief. The learner has shown they can recall and apply limited business and enterprise technical skills and knowledge. In this session, the learner could complete a resubmission to try and improve that grade. And they've achieved the level 1 merit overall. Now we're going to look at another example and the grades achieved for each assessment objective. So as you can see straight away, this example contains a lot more detail. So when we look at assessment objective 1, this example is actually being graded as a band 3. And the reasons for that are the learner has demonstrated they have comprehensive knowledge. They've used a wide range of business and enterprise principles. They use specific terminology and it's accurately used, and it's consistently used throughout their project brief. The learner has evidence there that they've carried out research outside of the brief. So, for example, they've researched target markets. They talk about the competitive environment, the 4 Ps and profit margins. Moving through the project, it's the same theme. The learners put a lot of detail into their responses. The band awarded for this assessment criteria, again, is a band 3. When we look at assessment objective 2, the learner has accurately applied knowledge and understanding of business and enterprise principles, which are relevant to the context and situation. They've researched the drone industry and they've utilised this in the context and situation of the project brief. The learner has portrayed an effective scenario. They've considered the employees which a company may need and then considered what employees the company can actually afford. So they've presented that vision of, if money wasn't an object, these are the amount of employees we'd like. However, when we've done a financial plan, these are the employees we can afford. So it's realistic and it's suitable. Again, this continues throughout the project with level of detail and analysis. The learner has critically analysed and evaluated data and information such as sales revenue and cost of sales data, in addition to the income statement information they were provided with. The learner has systematically reached reasoned and valid conclusions. They've evaluated what aspects of the business plan will work and which aspects need revising. We're moving into the financial plan now and looking at assessment objective 4. Again, this has been awarded a band 3. And the justification for the awarded grade, the learner has demonstrated and applied relevant business and enterprise technical skills effectively by applying and using appropriate processes, tools and techniques. They've incorporated gross profit, net profit, profit margin calculations into the business plan. Not only have they carried out those calculations, but they've demonstrated and applied relevant business and enterprise skills to develop complete and effective outcomes, providing a good evaluation to the business plan, including detailed financial information. As you can see from the slides, the learner has added substantial detail to the financial section of the plan to evidence knowledge and application of technical terms, tools and techniques. Costs are realistic and are used to calculate monthly and annual running costs. The learner has then used this information to detail the impact of the predicted net profit to the business. The learner has calculated net profit predictions over the first 3 years of the business. The figures are supported by an analysis of the impact to the business and ways that the business may be able to mitigate such losses. The analysis is sensible and considered, and that's a consistent theme throughout this example. The learner queries the viability of the business. And then moving into the final section, the learner evaluation. So assessment objective 5, again, this is achieved a band 3. The learner has managed the project through a learning log, preparing and planning a wide range of project stages, timeframes and resources. The detailed section also includes an evaluation of the business plan and how it's been tackled in stages and resources have been utilised to manage the project effectively. The learner has evaluated a range of their approaches, skills and accomplishments. The second stage of the evaluation considers all elements of the brief from concept to completion. The learner has evaluated the viability of the business and also how well they have completed the business task. The learner has evaluated a range of approaches, skills and accomplishments, detailing what they did to complete the project and how successful each strategy was. The learner has achieved band 3 for each of the assessment objectives that we've looked at today. So overall, the project is detailed, it's accurate, it's logical and it's considered. The learner has achieved a level 2 distinction. The learner has shown that they can recall and apply thorough business and enterprise technical skills and knowledge. This is a strong submission. The learner has taken the brief scenario and used this as a basis for their business plan, adding their own ideas, research and thoughts to create a detailed plan. The learner has analysed data and evaluated their findings. So now I'm going to I'm going to hand back to Kelly.
Thanks, Cheryl. That was really informative and useful. So what I'd now like to talk you through is some general guidance when giving feedback and the documentation that is available to support you. Cheryl will then pop back on to talk you through some more specific guidance on giving feedback to your learners and provide some good practice examples. So here is an example document for the assessor to give feedback to the learner. The feedback can be given to the learners usually after the EQA visit has occurred. The feedback can't be overly specific and directed, so it might be best to use the grading descriptors to assist with the feedback that you give to your learners. So for example, you might say something like, you have described X, but you need to explain the importance of X. Or you have used some key terminology, but you need to use the key terms more consistently throughout your work. There is one other option available which is better suited to the Synoptic project, which is contained within the grading calculator. On the third sheet of the grading calculator, called Learners, there are the 5 assessment objectives and the bandings. You can copy and paste this into a different spreadsheet or Word document and use it for giving feedback to your learners. You can circle the relevant banding they achieved and write your comments for each assessment objective. Again, these are only suggestions, but they are available for you to use. I'm now just going to hand back to Cheryl, who will talk you through some more specific guidance on feedback and how to make it more effective.
Thanks, Kelly. This slide will highlight good practice examples that you could use to provide effective feedback to learners. Remember, feedback should be provided to learners after the project has been sampled by your internal quality assurer, which is in line with the adaptations for the session. Feedback records must be maintained for review. Your EQA will ask to see your feedback records as part of the review. Effective feedback is developmental and constructive, providing the learner with an overview of how they have performed. A good framework to use is to identify what went well and what the learner could do to make the project even better if. So for example, you have used business terminology throughout the project. On occasions, you have confused public limited companies with private limited companies. Go back to your notes on business types and review this section. Or identify where learners could add more detail or examples to strengthen their responses. Effective feedback should be evidence-based. Pick out points from the learner response to highlight key areas of strength. As Kelly has previously mentioned, a good starting point is to use the band descriptors to scaffold feedback. This strengthens the audit trail of assessment and starts to create a rationale for the band and grade that you have awarded. Use probing questions to extend learner responses. So, for example, why do you think advertising in high-end magazines is the best option? Are there any other methods of marketing the company could use? Maintain any records of resubmissions. Again, the EQA will want to see this as evidence of formative and summative feedback. Formative feedback can be used to encourage learners in this session, acknowledging what they have achieved and what further developments could be made in their resubmission. Annotate learner work to evidence the formative feedback you've provided. Use probing questions to encourage learners to expand answers or conduct research. Overall, summarise key points to justify the grades awarded. I'm going to hand you back to Kelly now.
Thanks, Cheryl. So now I'd like to talk you through the quality assurance process, starting with the internal quality assurance process. And then again, Cheryl will then come back on and explain some of the things that you could consider when you complete the IQA process that will help make it easier for you and more effective. So the internal quality assurance stage is the final check of the Synoptic project within the centre. The internal quality assurer should be able to correctly assess and moderate the work, so therefore they need to be firstly knowledgeable on the content, competent on the grading decision, the grading system, and not be involved with the teaching of the learners. If it is your first year of delivery, then we do recommend an IQA sample of 50% of the learner cohort. And this sample should contain a wide range of learners, grades, assessors, and so on. But after the first year sampling can be reduced. And while there is no specific number on the size of the sample, it should still be large enough to give the IQA a picture of the work that has been completed by the learner and the cohort. So we would recommend between a 20% and 40% sample. Grades can be given to the learners after this IQA has been completed, but you should inform them that this may change based on the EQA's review. Under normal circumstances, when it's business as usual, no feedback is to be given to learners at this stage, and feedback should be directed to the assessor. So ordinarily, those grades would need to be submitted to us by the 31st of March each year, and it would be your EQA that would then sample the work and the assessment decisions and would either agree and bank the grades or reject them. Your EQA would then discuss their findings, give you an action plan, and then the new grades would be banked for those learners. Following the EQA review, that's when you would give the learners their feedback and they would be entitled to one resubmission. Learners usually are to use the same Synoptic project. They would have another 21 hours in supervised controlled sessions, and the work again would then be assessed and internally quality assured again. And the resubmission grade is usually to be with us by the 31st of May. Now, as I've said, this is the process when it's business as usual, so a non-COVID-19 /pandemic. But as we've said, there are adaptations in place for this session, and I will go into a little bit more detail in the webinar when I talk through the resubmission process, in particular for this year. So we did say earlier that we will talk about how you can estimate their overall grade. So determine the grade achieved for the Synoptic project. You can use the grading calculator, which we have mentioned that can be found on QualHub. Now, within the grading calculator, there is a place to put their learner's exam grade so that you can determine their overall grade for the technical award. If you don't know their exact UMS, but you think you know what grade they will obtain based on mock exams or other predictions, then you can place that in the provisional grade column. If they've actually sat their real external assessment, then you can put their actual UMS score into the actual exam grade column. If you use the provisional exam grade column, then the calculator will give you the maximum and minimum grade that the learners would be expected to get. If you've used their actual exam grade, it will then calculate their estimated actual overall grade for the Level 1-2 Technical Award. You can also place the band achieved against each assessment objective for the Synoptic project. This will then calculate the estimated grade that they're expected to achieve for the internal assessment, which is the Synoptic project. So using the example on this slide, you can see that with learner A, the band they achieved were a 2, 2, 2, 1 and a 2, giving them an overall grade of a Level 1 distinction. Whereas learner B got 2s for every assessment objective and got a Level 2 merit overall. So that is the only assessment objective that learner B did better on, but they jumped up 2 grades. And this just shows how important assessment objective 4 is with its heavier weighting. Also on QualHub, you will find in policies and documents, you'll find course file documents. Now your EQA may recommend that you create a course file to contain all the relevant documentation and evidence that you'll need for when they visit or perform their review. The documents and guidance on this page will show you what kinds of things you could include in a course file. Please do note though that this is for guidance only and it isn't mandatory that you include everything that is included here. You may wish to adapt the documents to fit your own centre's way of working. This is intended to demonstrate what basic documents could be included in the course file and what our EQAs would look for to ensure you have appropriate arrangements in place to deliver and assess our qualifications. It may be that you have other documents depending on the internal processes in your centre and the qualifications you're delivering. Also, within the course file documents, there is the IQA documentation, and this includes a sampling plan template and an IQA feedback to assessor example template. So hopefully you will find those of some use and enable you to support you. So I'll now pass back to Cheryl, who will talk you through some considerations for the IQA process.
Thanks, Kelly. I think the important thing to remember when you're thinking about your internal quality assurer is that they are your critical friend. Their role is to support and offer advice and guidance to you, the assessor. Feedback provided by the IQA should always be directed to the assessor and not the learner, as the feedback is on the assessment decisions and the assessment process. You should have an IQA sampling plan and strategy in place, which outlines the IQA activities that you will complete over the 21-22 session. I would recommend that as part of your sampling plan, you sample a full grade profile to ensure consistency of the assessment decisions across the cohort. So for example, if learners have achieved Level 2 pass, Level 2 merit and Level 2 distinction grades, the IQA should select a sample from each of the grades achieved. IQA feedback could also consider what went well and what would be even better if. IQA feedback should think about, do they agree with the grade awarded? Are the assessment decisions accurate? Is feedback provided to learners developmental, constructive, and does it confirm achievement? And are there areas of good practice that should be recognised and shared with the team? Okay, I'm going to hand back to Kelly now, who's going to talk you through the resubmission process.
Thanks, Cheryl. So I'm going to talk you through on this next slide the resubmission process in particular for this session, and then Cheryl will explain some examples again for good practice for this process. So as I've explained on a previous slide, there are adaptations in place for this year, and whilst IQS must still be undertaken in line with our approach to awarding an assessment, the adaptations confirm that resubmissions should be managed internally within the centre, and assessment and IQA records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail of the resubmission. The first submission grades are not to be entered onto the portal. Once learners have been given their feedback, they can have one resubmission of their Synoptic project. In this session, though learners are still to use the same Synoptic project, so they don't have to start from scratch, they can add or make changes to their previous work, but they are permitted unlimited hours to complete their resubmission. The learner can use the feedback that they have been given to also make improvements. Once the learners have completed their work, it would be marked again. An internal quality assurance check would be also carried out again, and then a second external quality assurance review arranged. It's essentially the same procedure as the first submission explained on the previous slide. So, in summary, learners are to complete the Synoptic project, and we have removed the requirement to complete this within a set number of hours. When completed, the assessor will mark it against the grading descriptors and fill in the grading calculator. The IQA will check the work and provide feedback to the assessor. Learners are given their feedback and are permitted to a resubmission opportunity, but this for this year will be managed internally by the centre. Grades for a learner's first submission do not need to be entered onto the portal, but assessment records again should be kept up to date to provide that full audit trail of the resubmission. And the final resubmission grades, if applicable, are to be submitted to NCFE via the portal by the 27th of May of this year. The EQA review deadline is before the 31st of July this year, and that's to allow results to be confirmed by the end of July for performance tables. The EQA will then check the work and either agree the grading decision or reject the grading decisions. I'll now hand back over to Cheryl, who will talk you through some best practice examples.
Okay, in terms of best practice around resubmissions, I would recommend that you maintain a tracker and assessment records which evidence the first and final submission. As mentioned before, this enhances the audit trail, and this is something that your EQA will be interested in. Remember to complete the assessment and IQA cycle again, as Kelly has just described. The IQA will provide feedback to the assessor on the assessment practices and confirm if they agree with the new grade awarded. If not, decide between the assessor and the IQA what the grade should be, and that is the grade that you will enter into the portal. Remember to maintain written IQA logs and feedback records to evidence the decisions that you make and the discussions that you've held. Again, your EQA will be very interested to see this information. I'm now going to hand you back to Kelly, who's going to talk to you about submitting grades to the portal.
Okay, so you can submit unit grades on the portal by selecting grade and then submit unit grades from the portal menu. You can search for your learners to submit unit grades using batch, forename, surname, centre learner reference or an NCFE learner number. You click to select the learners that you would like to submit grades for. Please do note though that unit grades should only be submitted once the work has been assessed and a sample has been internally quality assured. Once this has been done, please submit the applicable grades for each learner. The unit grades will be stored until your EQA banks them following a successful quality assurance review. Please check the information you're about to submit is correct, as once the grades are submitted, you're unable to make any further amendments. Select the learners that you would like to submit the grades for and select Next. When you select a unit, you get the option to select a grade for each learner. When you are finished selecting grades, tick the declaration and complete the full name of your IQA before selecting Submit. Confirmation of successful unit grade submission will then show. Do recommend that you save or print a copy of this screen for your records. If you do require any further support, we do have the portal support user guide that you can access, or you can contact our customer support team who can help with this if needed by contacting either them directly on the phone on 0191 239 8000 or via email at customersupport@ncfe.org.uk. Cheryl will now talk you through some of the best practice as your EQA.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, as your EQA, I'd like to offer some guidance here to make the process easier for you. So learners have the opportunity to complete resubmissions. This will be managed internally by you, and when learners have completed all work and achieved their final grade, this will be entered into the portal. And then, as an EQA, we can review those grades and your review can take place. Communicate with your EQA and advise of who has submitted resubmissions and detail any special considerations or support provided. This will influence the sample. The EQA review will sample a cross-section of the grades achieved by your learners, from a level 1 pass up to a level 2 distinction. The sample will be sent to you before the review, but we can't send you that sample until the final grades are submitted into the portal. As I've mentioned before, we will sample across the grade profile and it will be sent in time for you to prepare for the EQA review. I'm now going to talk you through the EQA review and the support that we have available. The final stage is the external quality assurance check. On QualHub, in the Delivery and Learner Support tab, we do have a section regarding EQA reviews, which you may want to have a look at to help you prepare. If you have already registered your learners, then you will have been assigned your EQA. An email will be sent out to the centre contact with details of EQA name, email, contact number. You are entitled to 2 free reviews or visits from your EQA, and it's worth contacting them now so that you can arrange your visit, as you may have as many as I have started booking in appointments already. These visits might be in person or they still might be a remote review. That's a discussion that you'll have with your EQA. These are some of the key things that the EQA will be checking. Your internal quality assurance process, a sample of portfolios to check your assessment decisions. They may want to check your schemes of work as well to look at how you've planned and delivered the programme. It can also include wider aspects such as policies and procedures. We look at CPD records of staff, just to have a look to see how they've maintained occupational competence. In terms of the Synoptic project, the IQA process and the assessment decisions are the most important. You need to have all learner work available for the EQA to check, and that's the learners that have been selected through the sample. Your EQA will either agree with your assessment decisions and the grades will be submitted to be banked, or they will reject your grades, and this can be from grading too harshly as well as too leniently. The EQA will have a discussion with you as part of the feedback session of the visit, give you some actions via a very supportive action plan, and then the new grades will be banked for those learners. If grades are to be changed by the EQA, this does not affect the learner's capacity to resubmit in a business as usual year. After the EQA review, feedback can be given to your learners. For this academic year, so 21 to 22, the EQA will only be looking at the final submission. As per the qualification adaptation in place, if you have any queries about that, please contact your EQA. The EQA review will take place when you've submitted final grades. Final grades are to be submitted via the portal no later than the 27th of May 2022. Learners have the opportunity to complete resubmissions, as we've already talked about, and this will be managed internally by you. And when learners have completed all work and achieved their final grade, this is entered in the portal. EQA reviews will sample across sections of grades achieved by your learners. EQA support is available throughout the year. If you have any queries, please don't hesitate to contact your EQA. You don't need to wait until you've submitted those final grades and you're ready for your review. Please contact us throughout the year if you've got any questions. We can discuss and plan the timing of the review. They have to be completed by the 31st of July 2022. Consider your internal deadlines and for assessment and IQA of the projects and plan your EQA review around those dates. You can complete the EQA review when you have completed the project. For some of you, that might be before the final submission date of the 27th of May 2022. So just as a reminder, your sample will be sent to you before the review. It will be sent after we receive the final grades via the portal. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact your EQA. As a starting point to prepare for the EQA review, I would recommend that you download your EQA report from the previous session. This can be downloaded from the NCFE portal. You can search for a visit report by selecting Search, then Visit Report. You can view all your centre's reports by selecting All in the visit type. Alternatively, you can refine your search by selecting a visit type from the list available or by entering a specific product code, product name, session and/or visit date. You can also find your EQA contact details by clicking on the EQA name, and you can view the visit report by selecting the PDF. Review your EQA report from the previous session, where you set any actions or provided with any recommendations that will support your delivery. Section 9 of the report will detail any actions or recommendations. And remember, actions are mandatory. Recommendations or suggestions for you to take into consideration. They are optional. So we've planned the EQA visit, you've received your sample. I come out, we do the visit, we look at the learner work. After that, you will receive an EQA report, which will formally document the outcome of the review. The report is uploaded to the portal 5 working days after the review is completed. When you receive this, I'd recommend that you read the report and make note of any next steps. This will have been discussed with you on the day, verbally with your EQA. Read the report just to make sure that you're aware of the next steps. So will the grades be banked or rejected? Do you have to follow a specific process to resubmit any grades as agreed with the EQA? You may also want to share the report with the qualification team. Take note if you've got any actions to put in place for the next cohort. Has the EQA given any recommendations to support the development of assessment and IQA practices? I'm going to hand back to Kelly now, who's going to talk to you about certification.
Thanks, Cheryl, and I certainly think this is the best bit. So now, yes, I'd like to talk you through certifying your learners and how you can claim your learner certificates on the portal. So now that the Synoptic project has been completed, learners, I'm sure, will be eagerly waiting for their certificates. And certificates can be claimed when they have taken and achieved a grade for the external assessment and they have a banked grade for their Synoptic project. For 2021-22, the EQA review deadline, as we've said, is before the 31st of July. And the portal user guide does contain details on how on submitting grades, viewing results, and certification for more support. So now I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. So you can make a certificate claim for your learners by selecting certification from the portal menu and clicking the Make a Claim option. Alternatively, you can select the Claim My Certificates option from the portal homepage. You will be taken to the results search page. Here you can search for your learners by batch number, product code, product name, forename, surname, or their date of birth. If you do require further options, you can select Advanced and options to search on Centre, Learner Number, the NCFE Learner Number, etc. Then these will become available. You can also search on one or more of these options. Your search results will show, then you select the learners that you would like to make the claim for, and then you click Submit. When claiming certificates for any of the VCERT qualifications, your selected learners will show. Your learners will be displayed within a new claim status. This is automatically calculated and will show as either full or partial, depending on which units have had grades banked for them. The grade is the overall grade if the learner has achieved if enough units for a full certificate is available. If you select a learner, you can see the grades for each unit that have been banked. If you don't wish to claim for a learner at this time, you can remove them from the claim by selecting the Move from Learner Form claim icon. You must confirm the address that you would like the certificate sending to and then select Claim. Furthermore, if you would like a purchase order number to show on any certification orders, that you can also complete that here in this section. You can review your claim before it is finalised, and it is worth checking that you have claimed all the units that the learner has achieved and the expected status is showing correctly. You can view the claimed units by selecting learner units. If you need to make any amendments, select Return to Claim before proceeding. Otherwise, select Claim Certificates to submit your claim. So we have now reached the end of the webinar, and before we do finish, I'd just like to do another quick poll to try and understand if there's been any change in your confidence levels. So I would like to ask for you to think about how confident you're feeling now with the assessment and moderation of the Synoptic project. And as with the first poll, 1 is little to no confidence and 10 being very confident. So I'm going to launch that poll and it should appear on your screen. So if you could just take a few moments to consider your confidence levels now. Okay, I think we've got all the results and all the responses that we're going to see. So I'm going to share those results with you. And I am really pleased to say that we don't have anyone in that 1 to 2 bracket and a very low percentage on the 3 to 4. So I do believe, as it was my expectation for the final question, that everyone has travelled a journey with us today, and that it appears that everyone is feeling more knowledgeable and certainly self-assured and a bit more confident about the assessment and moderation for the Synoptic project for business and enterprise. So thank you everyone for those responses. So I do appreciate we are just a little bit past 4:30, so we have reached the end of the webinar. I have been keeping an eye on the question box, but there haven't been any coming through. So that means, well, I'm hoping that means that myself and Cheryl have answered all the questions that you may have had before coming onto the webinar. So I will remain on the webinar for a little bit longer if anyone does have any questions. But if you're like me and they pop up after the webinar when you've had time to digest all that information, then do feel free to contact myself directly at kellyjohnson@ncfe.org.uk. If I'm unavailable, we do have a general email, which is provider.development@ncfe.org.uk. And of course, please do contact your EQA. Remember, your learners do need to have been registered to have your EQA allocated. And your EQAs are a real valuable source of support and can answer any subject-specific questions that you have. So I do see that a question has come, a couple of questions. So is this available to be seen again? Right, yeah, absolutely. And the same question, can we have a copy of the video? So in answer to both those questions, absolutely, a copy of this recording will be sent out in the follow-up email that will be sent to everyone that has attended in the follow-up email. So please do keep your eye out for that. And if you've not yet left the webinar, you're also free, please feel free to access and download the PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides, and that's available to do so in the handout section, which is on your GoToWebinar panel. It might be easier to have a copy of the slides as well as the video. So I hope that helps answer that question. So just while we wait to see if there's any more questions, the final slide I just wanted to include, just so you've got oversight of the useful links that you can refer to if you do require any further information and or support. So the links that I've included here are our approach to award and assessment, the adaptation blueprint, and the quality assurance process. At this point, I am aware that we have gone over slightly, so if you don't have any further questions, please do feel free now to leave the webinar. And when you do leave the webinar, we'd really appreciate it if you could complete the short evaluation that pops up to help us make any future improvements and or changes to the service and support we provide. So on that note, I would finally like just to say thank you for everyone for attending, for listening, and I really do hope it's been of some use. And finally, on behalf of everyone here at NCFE, we do wish you a continued safe and successful year. Thank you. And by the way, thank you very much for Cheryl's support on this webinar. It has been invaluable.